Something is seriously wrong inside the Indiana Fever organization. Not the kind of wrong that gets fixed with a halftime adjustment or a post-game speech. The kind of wrong that festers behind closed doors, leaks out through cracked locker room walls, and eventually explodes in front of the entire world. And right now, that explosion is happening in real time. The details coming out of Indianapolis are the kind that make your jaw drop and stay there, because what we're allegedly witnessing isn't just a team going through a rough stretch. According to multiple reports and locker room sources, what we're watching is a coordinated, calculated effort to undermine the most important player the WNBA has seen in a generation. And the people supposedly behind it, the very people who were supposed to protect her. Before we get into the specifics, understand what's at stake here. The Indiana Fever were a forgotten franchise. Attendance was down, ratings were down. Casual sports fans couldn't tell you the name of a single player on the roster. Then, Caitlin Clark arrived. Suddenly, arenas were selling out. Television ratings were shattering WNBA records. Sponsors were lining up. The league had its moment, its crossover star, its once-in-a-decade opportunity to plant a flag in mainstream American sports culture. And now, if the reports swirling around this team are even half true, someone inside that building has been working overtime to throw all of that away. The question everyone is asking is simple: why? And the answer, according to sources close to the situation, is even simpler: ego. To understand how everything unraveled, you have to start with the loss against the Dallas Wings. On paper, it looked like a bad night. In reality, it was something far uglier. Analysts who covered the game described it as one of the most painful, unwatchable basketball performances of the entire season. Not because the players didn't have talent, but because the system they were being forced to play in seemed almost designed to neutralize the one weapon the Fever had that nobody else in the league could match. Dallas came in with a clear defensive game plan. They were physical, they were disciplined, they limited Indiana to one shot on almost every possession, contested everything at the rim, and made sure their bigs were in position to clean up every rebound. It was a well-executed strategy, and any competent coaching staff would have seen it developing in real time and made adjustments. That's the job. You watch what the defense is taking away, and you find something else. You move the ball differently. You change the spacing. You put your best player in positions where she can hurt them in ways they haven't prepared for. None of that happened. Instead, the Fever ran the same stagnant, predictable offensive sets over and over. The pick and roll, one of the most basic and effective tools in basketball, was barely used. Caitlin Clark, a player who can hit shots from the logo and whose gravity alone should be pulling defenders out of position and opening up lanes for everyone else, was left standing in the corner while possessions died slow, painful deaths. The ball moved like it was afraid of something, and the longer the game went, the more obvious it became to everyone watching that this wasn't just a bad night. This was a systemic failure, and it started at the top. The fans inside the arena felt it. The atmosphere shifted from anticipation to frustration to outright anger. By the fourth quarter, the booing wasn't just background noise. It was loud, sustained, and directed specifically at the coaching decisions being made on the sideline. Social media had already caught fire before the buzzer sounded. Commentary from analysts ranged from baffled to furious. Multiple voices in and around the league described the game plan as rhythm-killing, lethargic, and a complete tactical disaster. The hashtag calling for the coach's job was trending before the final seconds ticked off the clock. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, the real story was just beginning. Losing is part of the game. Every coach, every team, every franchise goes through it. What separates good leadership from bad leadership is what happens in the hours after a tough loss. Do you look inward? Do you study the film and identify what broke down and put together a plan to fix it? Or do you look for someone to blame?
According to locker room sources, what allegedly unfolded inside the Fever facility after the Dallas loss was deeply troubling. Reports suggest that rather than owning the tactical failures that were visible to anyone with eyes, the coaching staff attempted to redirect the narrative. The loss, according to these accounts, was framed internally as an execution problem, a player problem, and not just any player. Caitlin Clark specifically was reportedly singled out. Sources claim she was accused of being insubordinate, of not executing the game plan properly, of being the reason the offense stalled. Let that sit for a second. The player who the entire basketball world watched being left in isolation while her team ran broken possessions around her was allegedly being blamed for the breakdown. The player who had no pick-and-roll run for her, no adjustments made to help her against a swarming double team, was allegedly being told she was the problem. And then, according to what's been reported, things escalated dramatically. It's claimed that the coaching staff went to upper management with a demand, a suspension. The argument, reportedly, was detrimental conduct. The message, allegedly, was clear: get her in line or bench her entirely. Now, to be transparent with you, these are reports. They are leaks from sources who may or may not have the full picture. Nobody has stood up with documented proof and said, this happened exactly this way. But what makes these reports difficult to simply dismiss is the context surrounding them. Because the pattern of behavior that people had been observing on the court and in press conferences for weeks was consistent with a locker room that had a serious tension problem. And when multiple independent sources point in the same direction, it's worth paying close attention. Here's the thing about the WNBA. It's a small, tightly connected world. News travels fast. Perceptions solidify quickly. And when something is going wrong with one of your most visible franchises, people notice, they talk, and eventually they stop whispering. The fallout from the Wings game triggered a wave of commentary from analysts, former players, and media personalities that was impossible to ignore. The consensus was damning. Multiple voices described the game against Dallas as not just ineffective, but borderline inexplicable given the talent available. One recurring theme was the complete failure to adapt mid-game. Good coaches make halftime adjustments. Great coaches make adjustments in real time, quarter by quarter, possession by possession. What was observed against Dallas looked to many veteran eyes like neither. At the same time, a separate but connected conversation was beginning to bubble up about the league's leadership more broadly. WNBA veteran Sophie Cunningham became one of the more talked-about voices when she suggested, without a great deal of subtlety, that the commissioner's position might be one that sees a change at the end of the season. Her exact framing was measured, acknowledging what the current leadership had accomplished, but the implication was unmistakable. She was saying in plain language that the direction the league needs to go might require someone new at the helm. And her willingness to say it publicly, clearly, without apology, struck a chord with a lot of fans and observers who felt the league's handling of multiple situations this season had been reactive, inconsistent, and tone-deaf. The broader commentary about the WNBA's watchability problem also resurfaced during this period. Critics who had been skeptical of the league's growth narrative pointed to games like the Dallas matchup as evidence that the product itself needed work beyond just star power. The argument wasn't about the players, it was about systems, about pace, about whether the coaching and strategic infrastructure around the league's biggest names was actually designed to let them shine, or whether something more complicated was happening. None of this was good for the Fever. None of it was good for the league. And into the middle of all this noise stepped someone nobody expected. Breanna Stewart is not the kind of person who jumps into other teams' business. She's a multiple-time champion, a former MVP, one of the most decorated players in WNBA history, and someone who has consistently carried herself with a certain level of professionalism and restraint when it comes to league-wide drama. She plays her game, she leads her team, and she doesn't tend to wade into controversies that don't directly involve her. That's what made what happened next so significant. Because when reports of the alleged suspension attempt started circulating through league circles, and when the reaction to the Wings' performance had reached the level of outrage it had, Stewart reportedly decided she could no longer stay on the sideline. According to accounts of what she said publicly, her message was pointed and direct. She reportedly made clear that what was happening in Indiana amounted to punishing a generational talent for a coaching staff's failure to adapt. She reportedly stated that threatening to bench or suspend a player who's responsible for bringing unprecedented attention and new audiences to the sport over what amounts to bruised ego and deflected blame is a disgrace to the game itself. The reaction to Stewart's reported comments was immediate and massive, because this wasn't some anonymous source. This wasn't a disgruntled former player with an axe to grind. This was one of the active cornerstones of the league, someone with unimpeachable credentials and a reputation for measured, thoughtful commentary. When someone like Stewart reportedly steps up and calls a situation a disaster, people listen. The validation that her reported comments provided to what fans had been saying for weeks was electric. It shifted the conversation from frustrated fan speculation to something that felt much more concrete. If an active legend at that level is reportedly saying this is real, this is malicious, and this is damaging the league, the front office of the Indiana Fever had a very serious problem on their hands. And that problem was about to get significantly worse. For weeks, Caitlin Clark had done something that takes an enormous amount of discipline and self-control. She had kept her mouth shut. Not in the sense that she was hiding or running from the situation, but in the sense that she was choosing her moments carefully. She was giving professional answers in press conferences. She was deflecting questions about locker room dynamics with the kind of measured response that PR teams spend millions of dollars trying to coach players into giving. She was playing the long game. But there is a limit to how long anyone can maintain that kind of composure when the pressure keeps building. And according to everything that's been reported, finding out that an alleged suspension had been requested in her name for conduct that observers largely attributed to coaching failures was the moment that limit was reached.
What followed was described by multiple observers as one of the most calculated, precise, and effective public statements a young player has delivered in recent memory. Clark reportedly stepped in front of cameras and laid out her position in clear, unflinching terms. She talked about why she came to this league. She talked about the work she puts in every single day and what she expects from the people leading the team in return. She talked about what happens when the focus inside an organization shifts away from winning basketball games and toward internal politics. And she reportedly said, directly and without flinching, that when the leadership of a team feels threatened by a player who is simply trying to compete and win, something is fundamentally broken. She didn't scream. She didn't attack anyone by name. She didn't wave her arms or lose her composure. She used something more powerful than any of that. She used specifics. She pointed at the film. She told the front office to watch the tape. She essentially dared anyone in that building to look at the actual evidence of what happened against Dallas and then try to make the argument that the failure belonged to her. It was a statement that put the ball squarely in the court of the people above her and said simply, "You choose." That kind of statement, delivered with that kind of precision, doesn't just change a press conference, it changes the entire power dynamic inside a franchise. You cannot unsay something like that. You cannot paper over it with a team meeting or a carefully worded organizational statement. It forces a decision, and the decision it forces is exactly the one that everyone watching already knew was coming. When a franchise player and the head coach reach a point of open public incompatibility, one of two things happens. Either the organization makes a decision quickly and cleanly, or it lets the tension fester until it poisons everything around it. Given the level of public scrutiny on the Indiana Fever right now, the quiet festering option effectively doesn't exist. Sources close to the organization reportedly indicate that the locker room atmosphere has shifted significantly. Players who had been aligned with the coaching staff's approach are said to be pulling back, reluctant to be associated with a situation that has turned into a public relations disaster of this magnitude. The front office is reportedly deep in deliberation about the path forward, and the deliberation isn't really about whether a change is needed. By most accounts, that question has already been answered internally. The deliberation is about timing, about optics, about how you navigate a personnel decision of this sensitivity in the middle of a season without making an already messy situation worse. The league itself is paying close attention. This isn't just an Indiana story anymore. This is a story about the WNBA's most valuable asset, its marquee player, its crossover moment, and whether the people in charge of managing that moment are equipped to handle the responsibility that comes with it. Sponsors watch situations like this. Media partners watch situations like this. The NBA, which has organizational ties to the WNBA, watches situations like this. The pressure from every direction is pointing in one direction. On top of all of this, the broader conversation about league leadership that Sophie Cunningham kicked off hasn't gone away. If anything, the Indiana situation has amplified it. The question being asked in basketball circles isn't just whether one coach should keep her job, it's whether the structures and the leadership surrounding the league are sophisticated and bold enough to make the kinds of decisions that a league in the middle of a genuine growth moment needs to make. Those are big questions, and they don't have easy answers, but they're being asked loudly now, and the Indiana Fever situation is the reason they're being asked. Here is what we know for certain, stripped of all the noise and the speculation. The Indiana Fever had one of the worst received coaching performances of the season in a critical game. The fallout from that game, according to multiple reported sources, triggered an internal conflict of a serious nature. A veteran WNBA player of significant standing reportedly weighed in publicly and condemned what she was observing. The franchise player delivered a public statement that has been widely interpreted as an ultimatum, and the organization is now navigating a crisis that is being watched by the entire basketball world.
What we don't know for certain is how much of the locker room detail is accurate, which sources are reliable, and exactly what was said or decided behind closed doors. Those are real unknowns. The specifics of what was allegedly discussed in private are exactly the kind of thing that gets distorted, exaggerated, and filtered through agendas by the time it reaches the public. Anyone watching this situation closely should hold the specific details with some degree of skepticism while paying attention to the undeniable broader reality, which is that something has gone seriously wrong inside this franchise, and it is now very much in the open. But here's the deeper question worth sitting with. What does it say about a league or a franchise within a league when its handling of its own generational opportunity becomes the story rather than the opportunity itself? The WNBA has more attention right now than it has had in decades. It has a player who is moving the needle in ways that don't come along often. It has a chance, a real, tangible, meaningful chance to convert this moment into something lasting. Every day that gets spent on this kind of drama is a day that chance is being squandered. And that, more than any single personnel decision, is what should be keeping everyone inside that league office up at night. The Indiana Fever are at a crossroads. The choice they make in the next few days or weeks will tell you everything you need to know about whether this organization is actually built to compete, not just on the court, but in the bigger game of building something that lasts. The whole basketball world is watching, and for once, that's not a metaphor. That's the full script. It's written to flow naturally, frame speculation clearly as unverified where needed, and build momentum from section to section. Let me know if you want any sections extended, toned up or down, or rewritten with a different angle.